Hi, we're Team 5, and for our final project, we decided to do conchas. Our team wanted to produce the highest quality conchas and understand the properties of their ingredients by manipulating the overall flavor profile, varying oven choices and bake times, testing different flour blends, and producing a dairy-free alternative. As a group, we performed many experiments to find the alternatives that would work best to create the best version of this delicious Mexican sweet roll. We found the best options involving the oven choice and flour type that can make a better version of the control. This led to using a deck oven with the incorporation of bread flour instead of a convection oven with all-purpose flour. Another success was the use of dairy alternatives in which we exchanged evaporated milk for almond milk and butter for lard. Our challenge throughout the experiment was changing the flavor profile. We brought the sweet flavor of chocolate chips into the dough, but struggled with our initial goal with incorporating dulce de leche within the cookie or yeasted dough. Ultimately, we created a dulce de leche buttercream to make a filling for the concha.
For our research objective, conchas were first made in the 17th century when French immigrants traveled to Mexico and brought their baking techniques with them. And through the combination of French techniques and authentic Mexican ingredients, the concha was born. Throughout this final experiment, we wanted to showcase how testing different variables such as flour substitutions, oven types, baking times, dairy-free alternatives, and new flavor profiles would allow us to understand the ingredient properties that create the highest quality concha while incorporating dulce de leche and chocolate flavors. With every dough variation, we will bake a batch in both the deck and convection oven while experimenting with different baking times to see how the results are impacted by this environmental change. We anticipate that the deck oven may produce better textural results, but conchas are a yeast leaven product. In creating our conchas, we will also be highlighting the rich chocolate flavors by directly incorporating chocolate into the dough and in the cookie on top. We tested a few different variations using chocolate that involved cocoa powder, chopped chocolate, and syrup to find the best method of integration that doesn't negatively alter the dough's texture or baking properties. We anticipate that incorporating dulce de leche in both our cookie dough and concha dough may prove to be difficult because the sweet dairy product is mimicked through two factors, flavor and texture. We must focus on the properties of the dulce de leche flavor to accurately show the texture. To solve this problem, we will be testing the use of straight dulce de leche, dulce powder, and malt powder. In addition to testing different flavor components, we will be looking at the effects on various flour substitutions and testing their outcomes on texture, taste, and density to find the superior ingredient that supports our hypothesis. The control recipe calls for all-purpose flour, so we will be experimenting with bread flour since it is the classic flour for conchas, and whole wheat flour. We anticipate some issues may arise when experimenting with whole wheat flour, and we'll need to address this concern as it will have a lower moisture content, require additional water, and produce an inherently tougher dough. For the final variation, our team will experiment with dairy-free ingredients that closely resemble our original control through texture and flavor. To better understand these properties of individual ingredients in the concha dough and how they react with each other, we will be substituting lard and Crisco for butter and almond milk and coconut milk for the evaporated milk. We do not want any ingredient substitution to create an overwhelmingly powerful flavor because this will distract from the sweet nature of the dough.
The problem statement of our experiment is, how can we produce the highest quality conchas and understand the properties of their ingredients to incorporate dulce de leche and chocolate flavors? Our hypothesis as a solution to the problem statement is, we can produce the highest quality conchas and understand the properties of their ingredients by manipulating the overall flavor profile, varying oven choices and bake times, testing different flour blends, and producing a dairy-free alternative. Here is a list of our independent variables. Our first one is going to be the flavor profiles of chocolate and dulce de leche. We're gonna put it in the dough through chocolate chips, cocoa powder, chocolate syrup, dulce de leche straight, and then a mixture of malt powder and dulce de leche. We're gonna incorporate these flavors in the cookie topping through cocoa powder and dulce de leche, and ultimately we're going to put it in buttercream. Our second variable is gonna be flour types. We're gonna do a test of all-purpose bread flour and whole wheat flour. We're also going to do oven types and bake times to see the different results. We're going to test the convection oven both for 10 minutes and 12 minutes and the deck oven for 18, 20, and 22 minutes. We're going to do a dairy-free version. We're going to test lard and Crisco in place of butter, and we're going to test almond milk and coconut milk in place of sweetened condensed milk. Now for our dependent variables, our first one is going to be a tasting panel and our poll questions. Our poll questions are going to be, on a scale from 1 to 5, do you feel that the chocolate chip concha made with bread flour has an overall softer and more appealing texture than the control made with all-purpose flour? 1 being tougher than the control and 5 being softer texture. Second question is, do you feel that the chocolate chips created a strong chocolate flavor that complemented the dulce buttercream? Third question, on a scale from 1 to 5, do you notice a positive difference in texture and density in the variation dough baked in a deck oven compared to the control baked in a convection oven? 1 being equal texture, 5 being positive, noticeably different quality. And our final question is, would you buy the chocolate chip concha in your local bakery? In our second dependent variable, we're going to measure the fat content in the dairy-free versions of our conchas. We're going to record the weight, both pre and post bake, of our dairy-free conchas to observe and record the effects they have on the density of the final products. We're also going to document the height of each final product to see the effects of various ingredients and their relations to the density. Some of our control / constant variables are going to be water, yeast, oil, sugar, salt, vanilla, and eggs. We want to keep most of these ingredient quantities the same, and we're going to intend to add chocolate and dulce de leche flavoring to the dairy, and in addition to experimenting with some dairy-free alternatives. We want to keep these other components the same, as they're going to help us taste and feel the difference in our variations and give us the opportunity to see and test the changes in the dough based solely on the new additions, oven types, and flour blends.
This is a list of the materials that we will need from the bake shop, which includes lard, silpats, concha cutter, proofer, mixer and dough hook, chocolate chips, sweetened condensed milk, almond milk, coconut, and Crisco. And we just want to note that the dairy-free version of the concha will be more expensive because of the almond milk and the Crisco that is added into the dough. And right now is a good time for you guys to taste the control. This is a list of just our bibliography of resources that we used.
So now we'll be moving on to our first variation, which is flavor profile. Now you can taste the chocolate chip concha with the dulce de leche buttercream. So while you guys are tasting this, I'm going to explain a little bit about our discoveries. We found that the best way to incorporate chocolate flavor into our conchas was through directly folding chocolate chips into the dough. Before coming to this conclusion, our team attempted to use cocoa powder and chocolate syrup, but these alternatives left the dough lacking rich chocolate flavors. As an attempt to incorporate dulce de leche into our product, we tried mixing it straight and combining it with malt powder, but both variations negatively impacted the dough's texture and did not convey strong enough dulce de leche flavors. We also attempted to incorporate it into the cookie dough, but ran into some issues. Ultimately, we created a dulce de leche buttercream that filled the chocolate chip conchas and created a harmonious flavor combination. When conducting our poll, we asked participants if they felt that the chocolate chips created a strong chocolate flavor that complemented the dulce de leche buttercream. Overall, our decision to incorporate chocolate into the dough through chips and dulce through buttercream positively supported our hypothesis with an approval rate of 78% from our participants. Here you'll find a chart that indicates the part of the concha being altered and what observations we made from when incorporating the chocolate and dulce de leche flavorings. So right here is the chart, and as you can see, we tried several flavor incorporations and we had some successes and failures. So that is why we ended up going with the chocolate chips within it, and we thought it gave great flavor and uneven distribution, and added a dulce de leche buttercream because we thought that was the best way to incorporate the flavor in the time being.
So right now is a good time to taste the bread flour variation of the concha. And we found that the best flour for our concha dough is bread flour because it produced a softer and fluffier mouthfeel than AP. The control for our project was originally all-purpose flour, but we found that it did not create the same results as bread flour. We also experimented with whole grain flour, which created a dough that was tough, with a tough crumb structure and lower moisture content. It was a positive change to incorporate whole grain flavors, but was not successful in supporting our hypothesis of creating the ideal concha. These rolls were more dense and had overpowering grain flavors. The superiority of the bread flour was proved when a survey about the difference between AP and bread was given to willing poll takers. Our poll states, on a scale from 1 to 5, do you feel that the chocolate chip concha made with bread flour has an overall softer and more appealing texture than the control made from the all-purpose flour, 1 being tougher than the control and 5 being a softer texture? The results from that poll showed that 78% of people chose either 4 or 5, which means they believe that the bread flour produced a more tender, satisfying dough.
Now is a good time to taste the concha that was made in the deck oven. So we found that across the board, the best oven to bake in was the deck oven because all the concha variations baked and rose evenly. The deck oven allowed for all the rolls to brown equally around the same time, whereas the convection oven created a lot of inconsistencies even when we rotated the conchas halfway through their baking time. In addition, the hot air blown around by the fan in the convection caused some of our rolls to deform and have a shorter height overall than those baked in the deck oven. So when conducting our poll, we asked our participants, on a scale from 1 to 5, do you notice a positive difference in the texture and density in our variation dough based on the deck oven, baked in the deck oven compared to the control baked in the convection? 1 being equal texture, 5 being noticeable different quality. Overall, our decision to use the deck oven supported our hypothesis as it created the most even bake for our conchas and allowed us to create the best quality product while incorporating the chocolate flavors. 80% of our participants overall agreed that the deck oven produced a positively noticeable texture in the doughs. So this is just a chart of all the best baking times and observations we found for the convection oven. We baked all of our doughs at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So we just found that the convection overall just browned really quickly. They baked in almost half the amount of time that all the doughs did in the convection oven, and they were pretty uneven. This is all the observations we found for the doughs that we baked in the deck oven. We baked consistently at 375 degrees, and it was 22 minutes across the board. We just found that was an even, perfect bake, and it created a soft, appealing texture and even browning on the outside of each dough. For our baking times, we found that the best baking time in the deck oven was 22 minutes and 12 in convection. Any time less than these were not successful, and they produced an underbaked dough. This is just a chart of all the baking times we tested. In the deck oven, we tested everywhere from 18 minutes to 22 minutes. And in the convection, we tested 10 minutes and 12 minutes. Now is a good time that you can taste the dairy-free concha.
So for our dairy-free concha, we found that the best dairy substitutes in our concha dough were lard in place of butter and almond milk in place of evaporated milk. The lard created a rich butter-like flavor and a soft texture that resembled the control. The almond milk was a more ideal option compared to the coconut milk because it created a tender texture, whereas the coconut milk had a much greater fat percentage that made the dough dense and unpleasant. We also found that Crisco is the best replacement for butter in the cookie dough. The Crisco created a more stable consistency when baked compared to the lard that caused a crumbly cookie mess. Overall, our decision of replacing the butter with lard and evaporated milk with almond milk in the concha dough and Crisco for butter in the cookie supported our hypothesis by allowing us to understand the properties of each substituted ingredient and how they react with each other. As you can see on the slide, we tested the lard within the concha dough and cookie dough and the Crisco with just in the cookie dough, and we ended up again choosing the Crisco for the cookie dough top because it gave more of a stable base and didn't crumble. And as you can see, the almond milk had a better texture and flavor, a more consistent bake, and the almond milk did overpower the flavor a little, so that means we just added a little more cinnamon and vanilla and it all evened out. And we found that the roll with coconut milk had a post-bake height of 2 inches, whereas the almond milk concha had a height of 2.5 inches. Coconut milk has around 50% more fat than almond milk, making the roll more dense and less likely to rise. Donna Curry states, a dough with a lot of fat can take much longer to rise, and that issue is complicated by the fact that many fat-laden breads also have a lot of sugar. This shows that the roll needed more time within the proofing stage because of the higher fat content. So as you can see within the chart, it shows our control, our coconut milk, and our almond milk. If we are given more time, we discussed that we would proof the coconut milk longer, but the almond milk, as of now, made the better alteration.
So for our conclusion, our goal was to produce the highest quality conchas and understand the properties of their ingredients by manipulating the overall flavor profile, varying oven choices and bake times, testing different flour blends, and producing a dairy-free alternative. In our attempts to support the hypothesis, we were ultimately successful in achieving our goal because we found that an appropriate flavor alteration that featured chocolate and dulce de leche, used a successful flour blend, chose an oven that produced an overall consistent bake, and created a textural and flavorfully satisfying dairy-free variation. However, we faced a few challenges that if given the opportunity, we would like to further explore. Our poll states, would you buy this chocolate chip concha in your local bakery? And 88.9% of people said that they would buy it if given the opportunity, which shows that it was a very high success rate. Our experiment can be improved by altering the way we incorporate the dulce de leche in our concha. One of our main focuses during this experiment was to include this traditional Mexican flavor, but it was more of a challenge than we initially expected. We attempted to incorporate dulce into the cookie dough on top, but there was no distinctly noticeable flavor through our attempts. We also tested the use of straight dulce in the yeasted dough and adding it directly in one variation and another with the addition of malt powder. This resulted in a very dense dough with no flavor that did not support our hypothesis. We ended up having to make a dulce de leche buttercream, which came out smooth and delicious for a filling to our chocolate chip variation. Although this was a successful alteration, it was not our initial goal. If we were given more time, we would like to find out more ways to incorporate the dulce within the dough or cookie, which would result in a distinct dulce de leche flavor without sacrificing the texture.
The application of this experiment was to produce the highest quality conchas and understand the properties of their ingredients by manipulating the overall flavor profile, varying oven choices and bake times, testing different flour blends, and producing a dairy-free alternative. To reach our goal, we experimented with different oven times, flours, and chocolate/dulce de leche flavors that would improve our control recipe through rich tastes and tender textures. To better understand the properties of the ingredients and how to substitute them, we experimented more with dairy-free conchas. The use of almond milk and lard proved that there are alternative options to making this classic roll texturally similar with minor flavor alterations. By understanding these properties of individual ingredients and how they react with each other, these ideas can be used in day-to-day productions at all bakeries and restaurants, where they can create alternatives for customers with dietary restrictions and to experiment with recipe testing. When conducting this experiment, we came across a few questions that could be answered through future tests and a few that we discovered the answer to through our own observations. Our project led to the ultimate question of, how can we noticeably incorporate the dulce de leche into the concha dough? As found on starchef.com, tapioca maltodextrin is used to stabilize high-fat ingredients such as white chocolate, foie gras, peanut butter, and oils. It then transforms the stabilized fats into powders that adds potent flavor and texture dimension to different desserts. If our team performed this experiment again, we'd love to see this question answered by experimenting with this maltodextrin powder more and applying the concept to dulce de leche chocolate. Thank you. Now, if anyone has any questions.